Harriet Quimby, aviation pioneer. Harriet Quimby was born May 11, 1875, in Michigan. Her family moved to California when she was a young teen. There, young women were stepping outside traditional societal roles, attending college, studying medicine, pursuing careers. This environment led young Harriet's independent spirit. After a brief stint as an actress, Quimby turned to journalism. She became one of California's premier newspaper women. However, by 1902, Harriet became restless. She longed for something more travel, more adventure, more challenge. She moved to New York City and was hired as a reporter for Leslie's Illustrated Weekly. Quimby incorporated her penchant for adventure into her stories. For one article, she convinced a race car driver to take her for a 100-mile-an-hour ride. When he asked, "Was that fast enough for you?" her reply stunned him. "'Twasn't very fast. Can't you make 120?" Quimby's interest in fast automobiles parlayed itself into a fascination with airplanes. People were still very much in awe that human flight was possible. Crowds of hundreds of thousands gathered at aviation meets or tournaments to witness airplanes in flight for the very first time. Quimby was not content to just report on the world of aviation. She wanted in on it. She convinced her editor to pay for her flying lessons. In exchange, she would write about her flying adventures for the magazine. Quimby had struck up a friendship with an American pilot named John Moisant, who had won a competition at a New York aviation meet. She persuaded him to let her enroll in his flying school. Even after Moisant died in a plane crash, she continued her quest for flight. On August 1st, 1911, Quimby became the 37th person in the United States to receive their pilot's license and the first American woman. Quimby joined an exhibition flying troupe and began competing in a variety of meets. Less than a month after earning her pilot's license, she won her first cross-country race and the accompanying $600 prize. That same month, Quimby became the first woman to fly an airplane at night. Her 7-minute flight earned her $1,500, equivalent to more than $30,000 today. In December 1911, Quimby set her sights on achieving another record, to be the first female aviator to fly across the English Channel. The 22-mile flight between England and France had first been accomplished by French pilot Louis Blériot in 1909. Since then, other male pilots had made the crossing. Some had died trying. She believed being the first female pilot to cross the Channel would bring her global recognition. In March 1912, Quimby sailed to England to make arrangements for her daring flight. Louis Blériot himself agreed to loan her an airplane. A British pilot named Gustav Hamel helped Harriet prepare. He instructed her on how to use a compass for flight navigation. Sunday, April 14th, was ideal for flying, clear and windless. However, Harriet had pledged to her mother not to fly on Sundays, so she deferred her flight, hopeful the good weather would continue into the week. Monday proved too windy to make the attempt. In the early morning of Tuesday, April 16th, foggy patches loomed in the sky. Harriet tried to persuade her to delay her flight. Hamel tried to persuade her to delay her flight. She refused. Hamel, doubting Quimby's ability to make the perilous crossing, offered to wear her purple satin flight suit and secretly fly in her place. She sensed the gathered spectators also questioned her ability to make the flight. Rather than discourage her, their skepticism made Quimby even more determined to attempt the flight that foggy morning. She climbed into the cockpit and took off over the white cliffs of Dover towards what she hoped would be a safe landing in Calais, France. Once airborne, the fog soon blocked her view of the land and sea below. When she believed she'd flown far enough to reach France, she dipped below the clouds. She saw France's shoreline, but was unable to locate Calais. She landed on a sandy beach approximately 25 miles south of her original destination. Her desired worldwide praise failed to materialize. Quimby's daring feat was overshadowed in the press by the sinking of the Titanic 2 days earlier. Her aviation achievement was downgraded to the back pages or not reported at all. Despite disappointment that worldwide fame had eluded her, Quimby loved to fly and continued competing in air meets. Unfortunately, her career was short-lived. On July 1st, 1912, less than 3 months after her Channel crossing, she made her tragic last flight. While performing at the Harvard-Boston aviation meet, her plane lurched in the air. Harriet's passenger and then Harriet herself were thrown from the plane. In front of horrified spectators, they plummeted to their deaths in the shallow waters of the Boston harbor. Harriet Quimby was just 37 years old. Almost 80 years after her death, Harriet Quimby finally received the accolades she had hoped her Channel crossing would bring her. In April 1991, the United States Post Office issued a commemorative airmail stamp honoring her contributions to aviation. The stamp featured Quimby dressed in her purple satin suit with an airplane in mid-flight in the background. The stamp simply stated, "Harriet Quimby, Pioneer Pilot." Next one, An American Girl's Daring Exploits, written by Harriet Quimby for Leslie's Illustrated Weekly about her flight across the English Channel. The sky seemed clear, but patches of cloud and masses of fog here and there obscured the blue. The French coast was wholly invisible by reason of moving masses of mist. The wind had not come up yet. I heeded Mr. Hamill's warning about the coldness of the Channel flight and had prepared accordingly. Under my flying suit of wool-back satin, I wore 2 pairs of silk combinations. Over it, a long woolen coat. Over this, an American raincoat, and around and across my shoulders, a long, wide stole of sealskin. Even this did not satisfy my salacious friends. At the last minute, they handed me up a large hot water bag, which Mr. Hamill insisted on tying to my waist like an enormous locket. It was 5:30 a.m. when my machine got off the ground. The preliminaries were brief. Hearty handshakes were quickly given. The motor began to make its 1,200 revolutions a minute, and I put up my hand to give the signal of release. Then I was off. The noise of the motor drowned the shouts and cheers of friends below. In a moment, I was in the air, climbing steadily in a long circle. I was up 1,500 feet within 30 seconds. From this high point of vantage, my eyes lit at once on Dover Castle. It was half hidden in a fog bank. I felt that trouble was coming, but I made directly for Calais, as I had promised the waiting mirror, photographers, and the moving picture men I should do. In an instant, I was beyond the cliffs and over the Channel. Far beneath, I saw the mirror's tug with its steam of black smoke. It was trying to keep ahead of me, but I passed it in a jiffy. Then the quickening fog obscured my view. Calais was out of sight. I could not see ahead of me or at all below. There was only one thing for me to do, and that was to keep my eyes fixed on my compass. My hands were covered with long Scotch woolen gloves, which gave me good protection from the cold and fog. But the machine was wet, and my face was so covered with dampness that I had to push my goggles up on my forehead. I could not see through them. I was traveling at over a mile a minute. The distance straight across from Dover to Calais is only 25 miles, and I knew that land must be in sight if I could only get below the fog and see it. So I dropped from an altitude of about 2,000 feet until I was half that height. The sunlight struck upon my face, and my eyes lit upon the white and sandy shores of France. I felt happy, but could not find Calais. Being unfamiliar with the coastline, I could not locate myself. I come down to a height of about 500 feet and traversed the shore. Meanwhile, the wind had risen and the currents were coming in billowy gusts. I flew a short distance inland to locate myself, or find a good place on which to alight. It was tilled land below me, and rather tear up the farmers' fields, I decided to drop down on the hard and sandy beach. I did so at once, making an easy landing. Then I jumped from my machine and was alone upon the shore. But it was only a few moments. A crowd of fishermen, men, women, and children, each carrying a pail of sandworms, came rushing from all directions toward me. They were chattering in French, of which I comprehended sufficiently to discover that they knew I had crossed the Channel. Those humble fisher folk knew what had happened. They were congratulating themselves that the first woman to cross in an airplane had landed on their fishing beach.